And there's significant parts of the Democratic Party not only have a history of that, but even today, right now, are not willing to do the things that they have to do to reverse the impacts of racism and reverse the impacts of poverty. And so the refusal or inability, on the one hand, the full embrace on the Republican side of racism, of almost overt racism, even sometimes overt racism, is bad, but the refusal to do anything to change the impacts of racism on the side of the Democrats is equally as appalling. And in the end, leaves poor and black people in the exact same position. I think the best thing that we can do is organize communities to fight for those things that we believe in, particularly housing as a human right, and move towards that becoming a reality. And I think there'll be plenty, just on the practical part, plenty of birthers and teabaggers who are losing their homes, who are going to join in on the movement, however reluctant they are to do so, and how reluctant they will be to do so under any kind of black political leadership. I think they're going to join it in one way or another. And they'll try to blame the left for it, but there's a significant number of those right-wingers right now who are in the exact same position as people in Liberty City or really all over Miami-Dade County. So I think this is a backlash, a white backlash happening, which has happened historically and is happening now, and it's going to happen, continue to happen. So I think we have to keep an eye on it. We have to figure out how to relate with it. But right now, our main focus is elevating housing to the level of human right through our own work, not through combating theirs.
This is pretty intimidating.
I guess I have two questions. The first one has to do with the utopic nature of Umoja Village. When I read your book and I was going through the paragraphs, it reminded me of the Paris Commune, which was a very emblematic moment in the history of Paris and also for the contestation of public space. So you go in your book into some of the contradictions that arise in this utopic moment, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about those contradictions in relation to the political strategy, the long-term political strategy, which is, I think, what the gentleman was referring to here, because there seems to be this learning process and this set of contradictions. The other question deals with this idea of housing as a human right, and I guess I'm not clear how that works as a right in the city, given that a human right has a universal principle that, in a sense, relates to the universal rights of man and the French Revolution, and we can argue about that, and you see it in the United Nations Charter, you see it even in the World Bank, used in international development planning. So there's some interesting contradictions there, and I wonder how that works then functionally, operationally, in a place that it has the city as its main scope. And I wonder if you can talk about that a bit.
So in terms of the contradictions in Umoja Village, we had it was in my mind, the mind of many people who went there, like a magic, we call it magic in a bottle in that place, where people went there and their lives were completely transformed by being there, by being empowered. And not only the people who lived there, but the people who came there. We had students come from Berry University, as well as many other schools, who came and volunteered. We had a group of students come from, I want to say, University of Wyoming, and they came down to South Beach to the party. They found out about us, and they came over, and they volunteered for 2 or 3 days. At Berry University, we had one student who came by who apparently was extremely quiet in class, never said any word, and then after going there, became extremely talkative, became very active, joined a bunch of clubs, and to the point where the professor who brought him there said his mother called when he went home for the Christmas break and said, "What have you done to my child?" And now he's talking about this stuff all the time. It was a magical thing, and I'm not saying that to ignore the negative things that happened, but it really was an incredible experience for many, many people. In terms of contradictions, there were clear contradictions because there was a big difference between, for example, the organizer. We wanted the place to be democratic inside, and it was democratic inside. Inside, on the land, it was completely democratic because the residents who were there made decisions. But there was a political message and a political vision to it which seeped and projected way outside and way off of the land. And the residents didn't have a real functional role there. We had all of our organizational meetings, the leadership did, on the land, and so the residents were there, they were invited, they were able to come, they were able to participate. Some did, most did not. But we had big level of difference in terms of political development between the organizers and the residents. We also had organizers who were thinking about social movements and thinking about social change all the time and how to talk about it, how to think about it, read a lot about it. And we had residents who were thinking, how am I going to eat tonight? And the ability for those two spaces to share space, to share political space, was very, very difficult and limiting. And so we had residents who were there who were playing a role in how their own society was run, but who also sometimes were oblivious to the impact of Rameau Village beyond the land. And there were many who were incapable of, because of their life situation, to contribute to the bigger picture, the bigger political sense also. And that's something we talked a lot about and tried to correct, and we're not able to do that in 6 months. We probably wouldn't have been able to do it completely in 6 years either. So there's something that's there. In terms of housing as a human right, I think housing is a human right because the idea of owning land is a bizarre, bizarre idea. And if you spend even a little time thinking about it, it would be very difficult for someone to say, I own this chunk of air that's over here, and then map it out and say, this chunk of air is mine and you can't come on here. Well, the air is not much different than the land. The land was here before any of us got here. It'll be here after all of us are gone. And the idea that someone could, draw, a map of this little area and put these artificial barriers here and there, and then say, I own this. This is my piece of the earth, is bizarre. I mean, it's not bizarre in a day-to-day sense because we're taught it from the time we're very young and we think about it every day and have to deal with it every day. But I think it's a bizarre idea that you can own land. And of course, when we read about the way Native Americans interpreted the overtures of the Pilgrims and the expanding U.S. colonies, they had the exact same idea. They're like, okay, you want to buy the land? Yeah, sure, you can buy it, ha ha ha, because no one can buy land. And without having a fully developed concept of what owning land meant. And I think owning land is a very bizarre concept. So I don't think that, I think in the sense of, the broader sense of land, no one person has any greater right to land than someone else does. I don't think the beach belongs to a hotel. I think the beach belongs to all people. And I think if you extrapolate that out, that means human beings have a right to build shelter, have shelter. And that doesn't mean, of course, that someone has a home, has a domicile, that anyone should just be able to walk in and out of it. But I do think that the idea of land belonging to everyone means that everyone then has a right to, can be easily extrapolated out to everyone has a right to housing. And I think the logic between land belongs to everyone and therefore everyone has a right to housing is a lot clearer and a much straighter of a line than it is than the logic of Citibank and Bank of America made a bunch of fraudulent subprime loans and got billions of dollars from the federal government, and therefore they own 50,000 empty houses around the United States. I think that is a much more difficult logical line to draw than the line saying that human beings have a right to have a decent, safe place to live.
We have to change